realized I didn't have my video on. It was like, do you all have to do something, or do I do it? I'm,
No,
avoiding most technology as much as I
you're
can.
fine,
So,
Rudy. Just, I'm going to introduce you, and I forgot to ask if you were going to show any slides.
no.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to introduce you, and then you talk, and we're going to ask questions.
Okay.
I'm pleased to introduce Rudi Keller today. Rudi came to Columbia from Louisville, Kentucky in 1983 to attend J School. In his first reporting class, he was assigned to work on Missouri state government. And he has been doing that ever since. That after he graduated from J School, he joined the Columbia Daily Tribune and reported there 19 years with a few years off. He resigned from the Tribune as news editor in 2020 after cuts and joined Jason Hancock from the Kansas City Star, Tessa Weinberg, who was a recent J School graduate, to form the nonprofit online newsletter, the Missouri Independent, and that is www.missouriindependent.com. Rudi has won many state awards, most recently the 2018 first place Best Coverage of Government from the Missouri Press Association. Rudi's topic today is historic achievement. I guess that means just one, Rudi, and embarrassing failures of the 2021 Missouri Legislature. Welcome to Rudi, and I think many of us know you already. So it's good to see you, Rudi.
Good to see you, Pam, and everybody. Alice, Carl, nice to see you. So the historic achievements of the legislature weren't just there was more than one. There was the prescription drug monitoring program. This was something that the people who have been trying to fight the opioid epidemic have been looking for years. And one legislator from Southeast Missouri who has a very compelling personal story, Senator Holly Rader, has carried that bill every year for 8 years while she was in the Missouri House, only to see it die in the Missouri Senate, mainly on the opposition of just one senator from Northwest Missouri, who has out now due to term limits. And how Senator Rader, well, she was term limited in the House. She won a narrow primary victory in Southeast Missouri district and put her in the Senate. And she quietly worked very hard and got it done in her very first year in the Senate. She is someone who I think should be watched over the coming years as someone who gets a lot of work done quietly, as opposed to the folks who became involved in the debate that resulted in one of the historic failures. And that was when the legislature did not renew what's known as the federal reimbursement allowance. Now, I thought I was being clever back in October when we launched Missouri Independent, and I looked at and I knew what the federal reimbursement allowance was from my long years of reporting, but I also knew that most people in the state didn't. Most people didn't even know it existed, probably, that hospitals pay a tax and nursing homes pay a tax and ambulance companies pay a tax and pharmacies pay a tax, all for the purpose of helping Missouri fund its Medicaid program. Well, knowing that it's a percentage of receipts and knowing that Medicaid expansion would result in higher receipts in all those categories, I thought maybe Medicaid expansion will pay for itself through these taxes, which can be used to match federal money that pays for Medicaid. So I did a story, I wanted to introduce people, our readers, to something that they may not have known about. Well, I had no idea it would become the issue of the session in terms of making the Missouri's budget work, and that for the first time in its history, the extension of the deadline, the passage of the bill, simple bill that just changes the date on which the tax expires, would fail. Never thinking that the legislature would possibly put $2 billion of what Missouri puts up for Medicaid to draw almost $4 billion of federal funds, put that at risk. Just didn't, I mean, that did not register to me until this debate developed over what a Republican senator from Jefferson County, who admits candidly that his views on abortion are as far to the right on making sure that no one has, there's no chance that a fertilized egg does not develop into a baby carried to term. That's his view. Once the egg is fertilized, nothing should interfere with the process, the natural process. And so he decided that he wanted to ban both devices and drugs that in 90 to 97% of cases are actually contraceptive and prevent fertilization, but in the rest of the cases can actually prevent implantation if fertilization does occur. And that's his target. And he drew a line in the sand over that. And even members of the Republican Party who have run consistently on the idea that they need a 100% rating with Missouri Right to Life have opposed that to the point where they would not allow the bill to be passed with that language on it. And so, and Senator Wieland and his supporters wouldn't allow it to be passed without it. So there we are. That's one of the big historic failures. The state is in the unusual position, well, unprecedented, historic position of having more money than it has ever had that is unencumbered in its past. Actually, in the neighborhood of the amount needed to replace the federal reimbursement allowance for a year. But then what do you do the next year for the $2 billion? And you've also lost any opportunity that $2 billion gives you to do something spectacular, important for development of Missouri, that may sound like a boondoggle, but 30 years won't. Hyperloop, who knows? We might be able to spend $2 billion on a Hyperloop. So so that's the choice. And so lawmakers are going to have to come back into special session sometime soon and see if they can get this solved. The other historic achievement in the legislature was the first tax increase of any kind since that is passed, that without requiring approval by voters, since 1993. And that was the fuel tax increase that will add 12.5 cents a gallon to fuel prices. And if you're careful and meticulous and keep all your receipts, you can ask for a refund of those extra taxes once a year if you do it in a 90-day window and you write all the right information on the receipts. But at the same time, the idea that a Republican legislature, that a supermajority Republican legislature is willing to enact a tax increase at all, that without going to a vote, but to do that and to bring Missouri into alignment on the Wayfair online sales taxes, which assuming when Carl chimes in, he'll tell us when the city is going to put that on the ballot again for a use tax. And, so those, both of those are potential revenue increases. Now, they're also going to cut income taxes at the top for the Wayfair tax to offset it. So they think that it might actually be negative revenue in a couple of years, but at the same time, it was something extra that everyone who buys things online in Missouri is going to have to pay, and the legislature is responsible for it. So that is an unusual event. And as a matter of fact, things like that led Democrats to put out press releases at the end of the session that many Democratic priorities passed this year. Of course, because the Republicans were split, but the split went in the way that the Democrats in the legislature, who normally don't have a whole lot of power, were advocating for. So, since the legislature has adjourned, we've had a lot of big events in politics. Vicky Hartzler is running for United States Senate. That opens up the seat that Columbia is part of, assuming Columbia stays part of it in the redistricting that's coming up. Who knows, they may even decide to split Boone County in the upcoming redistricting. One thing that should happen in the upcoming redistricting is that the Senate district that Caleb Rowden holds, which is he cannot run for re-election to that seat, Boone County will either be in one Senate district, or there will be it will be Boone County minus a sliver to attach to another county for a Senate district. And there will be no, for the first time, the senator from Boone County will be elected only by residents of Boone County. And that should, since I think Kurt Schaefer, and one other man who got elected in the 70s, are the only Republicans to have ever carried Boone County in a Senate race, state Senate race. That should give Democrats an advantage in 2024 when the seat is open. So I didn't actually prepare some remarks for this today because I've been chasing around, like going out to Lee's Summit to see Vicky Hartzler start her House, her Senate campaign. So I think I'll just open it up to questions and see what you all have is on your mind right now.
Well, let me ask.
Alice, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Could you explain better, I was sort of missing it, why we would get our own senator from Boone County in the redistricting? Secondly, what do you think may happen with the initiative petition if they include that in the special session?
Okay, so because under the Missouri Constitution for drawing Senate districts, if a county has equal to or more than the population necessary for one Senate district, then the Senate district has to be drawn entirely within the boundaries of that county, with any excess being attached to another district. And you can only do that, you can only split the county once that way. So for example, in a large county like St. Louis that has several Senate districts within it, there can be only one Senate district that picks up the remainder of St. Louis County. You can't split the remainder among other districts, and you can't split a county that has enough population for one full Senate district.
Rudy, what is the number?
Well, it's let's see,
Is it according to what is the
population target for a Senate district is going to be about 181,000 people.
I see.
And the most recent census estimate for Boone County's population is 180,463. So if, and that was an estimate as of July 1st, 2019. So if the census counts 181,000 people in Boone County, it'll be a Senate district.
Wow. Excellent.
Probably 180,463 is close enough that you wouldn't attach another county, because that would throw it way over the smallest county adjacent is Howard, and it's got 12,000 people. So that's why. And also in the House districts, this is new for this redistricting. Clean Missouri went away, but for this redistricting for House districts, that Senate type rule applies. So the House district population target is going to be about 37,750, and 180,463, right? So that's 4.8 essentially House districts in Boone County's current population, and the configuration right now is 2 districts within the county, entirely within the county, also almost all within the city limits of Columbia, and then 3 districts that cross into county lines. The 50th that takes in parts of 4 counties, the 47th that takes in parts of 4 counties, and the 44th that has a little bit of Randolph County. One of the things the Republicans did when they replaced Clean Missouri is that they said that you can only cross county lines once for House districts as well. So what that means is there will be 4 House districts entirely within Boone County, plus 8/10 of another. And that, or maybe a little bit more. So that is going to change the political dynamic in those House races as well, for Boone County. So your other question, Alice, I'm sorry, I've been told.
Excellent.
I've been told that when you ask Rudi a question, you get it's like taking a sip from a fire hose.
The chances, they're talking about the special session, including the initiative petition process that they've wanted to get rid of for years, or change.
Right. So the idea may be to either require signatures from every congressional district, or to make an initiative proposition proposed by initiative, require a super majority to pass it. Those are a couple of the ideas they've been talking about. Well, and there may be multiple special sessions this year.
Wow.
First and foremost is they want to settle the FRA issue. And what we've been hearing is that it may be possible. A bill can be passed in 5 days if there's no serious opposition under the Missouri Constitution. What we're hearing is that that's what the governor wants for FRA. and he just wants to have a special session, come in, boom, go home. There are groups of legislators clamoring.
Could you explain what FRA is?
The federal reimbursement allowance, that's the provider taxes that support Medicaid that were not renewed. It keeps getting, I'm sorry, I'm using legislative jargon, because that's, and I try to avoid that as much as possible in my writing. So they wanted to get that done to get the budget in balance. Then there are farmers who want, our ag legislators who want legislation that would basically support corporate agriculture. There are, there's every group you can think of. There are, there's conservatives who think that local governments shouldn't have the right to rearrange their budgets. And so therefore, they want to put in state controls on what councils can do with police budgets. There are groups of legislators who, just about any issue you can think of that has a constituency, there's been a demand for a special session. And so what Parson, I'm looking at the story of Robin Carnahan being in charge of the GSA that's on my other screen right now. And, and of course, that's part of the problem of being as old as I am. I remember how other governors did things, like actually, walking out in the halls and talking to legislators and asking them for votes, which doesn't seem to be much in the style from in the last several governors. But, Governor Parson is going to have to ask the legislators for this. And, he's going to have to, and redistricting is something else that will be a special session. Now, we all, just to remind you, the legislative districts are drawn by commissions of people drawn from both political parties that are appointed by the governor to do this. The legislature is in charge of congressional redistricting. The data is going to come in September. Filing opens at the end of February. The redistricting commissions, I think, have 6 months to do their job, which would take them right to the end of filing before they even file a map, maybe. So the congressional redistricting, I'm sure, will happen this fall. If there's any real desire by the governor to have that initiative changes made, he would probably put it in the special session that is dealing with redistricting, because that's election issues, right? I think Scott had a question, Pam.
Go ahead, Scott.
Or,
You can
It's
call anybody.
It's a little off topic, but Rudy, I'd like for you, if you have time, and do it later if it isn't relevant now. I don't know who's, David, you but two things I'd like Rudy to talk about. And one is about the Missouri Independent, which is an excellent paper, which I've been reading online since Rudy went over there. And the articles are very perceptive, all the way from Rudy's Civil War historic articles to the current ones they write and read, and they're right up to date on all politics. And if you might mention that, Rudy, and also I still am impressed with your 4-book series on the Civil War, which you wrote at the Tribune. And I'm interested if you're doing any more research like that or reading like that, and to talk about those books and any of your history on that. Now, I know that's a little off topic.
Well,
Everybody ought to be up to speed on your articles because they've read them all, I'm sure.
Well, Scott, I appreciate the plug. Missouri Independent is a not-for-profit. And there are, when you read our articles, we make sure to ask you to click here so that you can donate for it to us. And we always appreciate when that happens.
Which I've happily done.
The Civil War series was a great work I did for the Tribune, and I draw on that constantly. As a matter of fact, you know, now that we're at the bicentennial of the state, I'm going to try to do some stories this summer that highlight some of the issues that were so hot at Missouri's admission, such as the dispute over the portion of the Missouri Constitution that made it illegal for free blacks to settle in the state, and which Congress objected to in 1820. And, you know, try to bring those, you know, the fact that Missouri was born in racial controversy to the forefront to explain partially why racial controversy is such a hot topic today. The context of, you know, what do we teach our children in school about race and about Missouri's origin is an incredibly important topic in the legislature right now, and quite fought over. And one of the from those who think that critical race theory and the 1619 Project are distortions of what America has been and is, to, you know, those who think that, you know, the civil rights movement is taught as, you know, not getting, you know, not taking a different seat on the bus, and I have a dream, and the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and now everything's fine. So the, you know, it's maybe still the most important topic in Missouri as it was at its founding, and I hope to write some stories that bring that into perspective.
That article on the critical race theory in today or yesterday's paper, and what it's an excellent, interesting article. I won't say any more than that, but I'm interested in that bill that they had this time, which passed the Senate, but didn't get out of the House, I guess, for other reasons, and has been passed in 8 or 10 other states, forbidding the teaching of the critical race theory and the 1619 Project in various states. Can you comment on that, Bill?
Well, that's kind of what I was talking about, is that the idea that what curriculum is being taught and what our students are being taught about, where Missouri started and what we are should be front and center of the bicentennial. What we, in addition to celebrating the fact that we're here and we made it for 200 years, and let's all have a piece of cake. Well, that's all well and good, but it needs to be, it should be also be a time for reflection about where we are and what we should be teaching. I think that critical race theory is something that should be taught alongside other points of view. But then again, I don't run education, so I don't know exactly how they established that curriculum. But I do know that when I wrote the booklet about the sharp end in Columbia, and how that grew and then was demolished, the students who worked on one piece of that for the Sharp End Heritage Committee, they had never learned anything about the civil rights movement here in Columbia, or the conditions of segregation here in Columbia. So I think that rather than, it needs to go deeper than whether we teach this theory or that theory, and it should be, the curriculum should ground the student in an understanding of what happened where they live in the period that has brought us to the current conflict over race.
I'm sorry, Al Plummer. I hope I didn't interrupt you. Al Plummer had his hand up.
No, Scott, in fact, you brought up a question that creates my question, and that is, I have two, Rudy. One, do you have any, or is there any interest on doing some research and or writing related to the Missouri Civil Rights Act? I was, as you probably recall, involved in getting that law amended along with Wayne Good in the Senate to a point where we had one of the better state civil rights laws in the country, which has been reduced to nothing. That's the one question related to that. Then another question, totally different, is with our current budget surplus in the state, does that trigger anything with the Hancock Amendment?
The second question first, no, it doesn't, because the Hancock Amendment is all based on the idea of how much is being taxed from Missourians that has not been otherwise exempted from its lid by a vote. And we are way, way below that. And the gas tax increase passed this year was designed to stay below the annual limit that it was also added in the 90s after the 1993 tax increase for education. Al, on the civil rights bill, yeah, I watched the debates when I was at the Tribune in the years 11, 12, 13, 14, is every time the Human Rights Act was being debated, the argument was being made, well, we're just going to align ourselves with federal law because Missouri law makes it too easy to and so it had to be, I think once again, this is a legal jargon issue where you have, is it contributing versus controlling factor, or what threshold did you have to show in order to prevail in your case saying that you had been discriminated against? Well, I'm not as well versed in what these distinctions are, but it clearly was something that those who want to protect businesses who wish to discriminate were pushing, because the idea that if you can point to anything other than what the person is accusing you of, then you can't prevail. And I think that was the crux of it. And I think I left the covering the legislature on a daily basis when they finally succeeded in getting that bill passed. But that does give me an idea that part of what I need to do is, what have been the protections in Missouri law for, from the debate over in 1865 over whether the emancipated slaves would have the right to vote in the, at least the male slaves, and, all the way up through the most recent iterations to the idea that, should these laws also cover sexual orientation and gender identity? Right now the federal law does, Missouri law does not specifically do that. And the federal law does by interpretation of what it says, not by its own plain language. So those are the issues that are the future issues. But I do, yeah, Al, send me an email, Al, at rkeller@missouriindependent.com, and lay out what you think I ought to be looking at.
I will do that. Thank you, Rudy.
All right.
Carl has a question.
Yeah, first of all, kudos for all the tremendous work that you've done over the years, Civil War and otherwise, and politics. You raised a question about Wayfair when you were talking about it. I put a little bit of it in the chat in terms of, we did discuss the Wayfair online sales tax issue at the last city council meeting, and more or less because of the state's action to make this effective as of 2023, kind of got a consensus along with legal that it probably was a good idea to schedule a vote on this sometime in 2022, or maybe at any rate not to do it now. There's no reason to rush. So, and I kind of want to get your take on some of these issues. There's a couple of other things. One is, you mentioned redistricting. That's obviously a hot topic. We just had a very disappointing, in my view, session at the last city council meeting where we decided not to seat a redistricting committee to get ready in preparation for the release of the data on September 30th. I think that was a mistake. And the reason I think it was a mistake is because we have probably the most progressive council that we've had in a long time. We don't know what the future holds. Maybe the mayor or I will decide to run for Senate like everybody else, US Senate, like everybody else. We don't know what the next, and we remember what happened in 2010 when there was an attempt, I was on the other side of the dais, an attempt to redistrict Ward 1 to include Benton Stevens and East Campus, which would have meant a very positive left wing, if you wish, political vote in that ward, and very conservative votes for the hinterlands. So that would have precluded any progressive decisions for a long time. So anyway, so what do you think about the redistricting decision? State preemption is something I mention every time I talk to anybody about this. It's very serious stuff, and it worries me. And then, of course, the latest news that hit the bombshell is that City Manager John Glasscock is retiring. So what do you think about any or all of those things?
Well, John Glasscock said he was going to retire after, a reasonable period of time when he took the position. And so I don't think anybody expected a Ray Beck type regime out of Mr. Glasscock, although I'm sure the council would have been happy to have him for a few more years at least, if that's what he chose. If you put off a Wayfair vote, or if you put off a use
We
tax,
tried to convince him, but it was not.
if you put off a use tax vote, then you're missing out what's currently being collected. I don't know if Amazon, for example, is remitting taxes to Columbia.
Yes. We're getting the 2% of the Wayfair taxes from the current stuff, but.
Oh, okay. Well, because everything that's like, for example, Amazon started collecting tax for Missouri because they wanted to have a facility in the state. And as soon as you have a physical facility in the state, you have to start remitting sales tax based on the pre-Wayfair precedents. But one of the things that Wayfair does is Amazon does not remit sales tax to Missouri for market facilitator sales. So if you're making Kewpie dolls branded for Hickman, and you're selling them on Amazon, because people, you know, every so often there's a wave of interest in the Hickman Cupies, and people go online to find out what it is, and then they go buy one. That would not be taxed. They would not remit tax to the state of Missouri for those Cupid dolls, because well, actually, maybe for that because you're in the state, but somebody outside the state wouldn't do that. But that's what Wayfair does, is that also captures those market facilitator sales that Amazon makes. So Columbia, if Columbia is getting something from Amazon, it's not getting everything that Wayfair will bring. So yeah, so it's a balance. If there is, if the state is collecting from retailers already, and Columbia is not getting a share of that money, then a use tax sooner would get the money sooner. If you wouldn't get anything that you aren't getting now, with the vote, until then, wait, that's fine. Let's see, I'm sorry, I lost the thread. Oh, preemption.
I mean, you mentioned preemption. And city districting.
Oh, city redistricting. Yeah, you know, when I wrote columns for the Tribune, I think at one point I urged that the council be enlarged. And I based it on the idea that the council in the original charter represented so many people per you know, per council member, and then the increase to 6, as it currently is, 6 wards, you know, had a council at a certain number, and by now that number is, you know, 3-4 times what it was when the council was enlarged to 6. You know, and you know, I don't know if necessarily you would double it. That would probably become unwieldy. You know, but 8 or 10 might, you know, would feel, you know, would make sure that that all the views in Columbia are represented. So, you know, you talked about the potential shift of Benton Stevens from the first ward to the you know, from your ward to the first ward, and after the 2010 census, and you know, a conservative voice on the council. You know, one thing that I appreciated about Gary Kesspool is that he understood finances in a very detailed manner, and he pointed out to me how the finance director at the time kept urging the council these bond issues that were backloaded with the principal payments. So there was a number of years where the city was paying interest, but not paying off any principal of these bonds as it added things. And the way it was being designed was that the city's debt payments wouldn't go up as a total cost, or but what it meant was that the debt was being extended, and interest, as you know, that doesn't pay off principal, just means that, you know, you're escalating the costs. Now, as a reporter, when, you know, since I feel like I have a good understanding of government finance, I appreciated his understanding of government finance. Now, the voters decided that the other parts of what he brought to the council were not what they wanted, and they reelected you. So, but perhaps there is room for, you know, and especially in a city this size, and the number of people that every council member represents, more council members would make a better, I think, for a better discussion of all views that are in the community. Plus, it would increase the likelihood of minority representation on the council as well. Was there anything else that I skipped over?
Preemption.
Oh, well, preemption is seems to be the, one of the new conservative philosophical arguments being made across the country. Okay, here's the crux of it. The states created the federal government. The states created all local governments. All authority and organization of local governments springs from the state. Therefore, anything that local governments can do that a majority of the legislature doesn't like, the state has the right to step in and stop it.
And they do.
Now, one thing that the Hancock Amendment did was it told state government that you can't tell local government to do anything without paying for it. For example, if the legislature passed a law that said Columbia, every city in the state with more than 100,000 people has to have one police officer for every 500 people. And that meant Columbia had to hire new police officers because we were below that ratio. It would be up to the state to provide the money to pay those officers in perpetuity. But what the Hancock doesn't say is, and so since they can't tell local governments what to do, they spend a lot of time telling them what not to do. And that means don't cut the police budget. Don't try to enact a law that says people can't carry a gun on their hip out in plain view as they walk down the street. Those are the kinds of things where the legislature has been stepping in more and more about what local governments can and can't do. And the only solution to it is elect different legislators, but that's, whether, but I don't think that that's actually the issue for Columbia's legislators. So, Pam, I think Sue has a question, and if I covered everything for Carl.
Yeah.
Okay, if I go ahead.
Go ahead, Sue.
What I wanted to ask you, Rudy, we got the announcement recently that Nicole Galloway is not running again, and she's the only statewide Democratic office that we have currently filled. What do you see as the implications of her not running, and what hopes can we as Democrats have statewide?
Well, I think that right now the writing is on the wall that the Republicans will have every statewide office until and unless someone with real dynamic appeal and the ability to get themselves in front of voters either through the media or through advertising or however it would be done and catch voters' imagination. It's not I don't think that it looks very good. I said in the article running through what appear to be 9 or more candidates for the Republican nomination in the 4th congressional district that winning the primary in the 4th district very well could be the same as winning the general election, given the track record Vicky Hartzler has amassed in the past 5 elections. Nicole Galloway did not run away with the 2018 auditor's race, even though she was running against the most flawed candidate Republicans have put up in decades. And you don't have to ask, that's not my opinion. That's the opinion the Republicans themselves had. Sondra McDowell was the Judy Moriarty, for those who remember who Judy Moriarty was, of the Republican Party. And she came very close to winning that year with no money and Republican leadership rolling their eyes. So, so Mrs. Galloway was, she saw the writing on the wall after losing 17 points to Mike Parson, failing to make a real impression in that last year, changing those poll numbers. I'm sure she looked at poll numbers all through 2020 and wondered why they weren't getting any closer. But Democrats, if they're going to return to anything close to parity to Republicans, are going to have to get to organize and work at it. The very active people in the St. Louis area that elected Tashara Jones as the mayor of St. Louis, and who are doing the kinds of things in that part of the state that Stacey Abrams did in Georgia as she built up the party in Georgia. I think if there's a model and a path, there's your model and your path. You have to, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of organizing, and it's a lot of putting aside any differences over, whether this particular issue or that particular issue is something you disagree on. If Democrats are to start taking back some of the things that they've lost, going back 20 years. It reminds me that Harold Volkmer, for those of you who remember Harold, in the year he lost to Kenny Hulshoff, was at a press conference in Columbia, and he said, "I just don't understand Boone County. They're liberal. I'm pretty liberal. I vote with them on 85% of things. Yet they hate me." And if you looked at, but the two issues were the two of the most emotional issues around, and it was abortion rights and guns. And Harold was on the board of the NRA, and he moved a discharge petition through the House to loosen gun laws. And Harold was a Catholic, and he was anti-abortion. And, by the time he was being defeated, he was against a Republican who was anti-abortion, who was no different from him on gun laws, and who differed from him on every other issue that as Democrats and Republicans would, but by that point, something had happened in Boone County politics that Harold Volkmer just could never achieve, inroads into the vote. For those of us who have been around for a really long time, Kerry Franke, who came close to beating Volkmer in the 80s, was a, abortion rights Republican. And she had much different views on gun control than Harold Volkmer did. And everybody thought, well, this is great in Boone County. Because Boone County has voted for Republicans for Congress on many occasions in its history. So, but by the time he lost, Volkmer was, so it's that 85% that, Democrats, if they're ever going to get back to it, they're going to have to find that 85% and stick together on that and not worry about the other 15%, until you have a supermajority in the Senate and you can fight like they do.
Yes, Herb. Go ahead, Herb.
Rudy, would you tell me what are your aspirations for the Missouri Independent? Where you want it to be, and what you hope will be? Let me tell you in advance that my favorite newspaper, state-focused newspaper, where I lived before in Texas, before moving to Missouri in 1971, was the Texas Observer, with its famous editors and its wonderful writer, Molly Ivins.
Oh, okay. Well,
raised Molly Ivins from the grave.
Yeah, I remember Molly Ivins and her commentaries that would run in the Tribune. What I want us to be is the leading source of important analysis and news from Missouri. We don't try to break every story. We don't, if the governor puts out a press release, we don't necessarily write up that press release. If, if you're someone who follows something like the Missouri Times, we are not going to do, lobbyist of the week profiles because, for advertisers, that's what they do. If you advertise with them, you become lobbyists of the week. And of course, we don't have advertisers, so we don't have to do that kind of stuff. I want us to be the thing that that news editors around the state go to, whether they're in broadcast or print, for something that they feel like is missing in the product that they're about to present to their readers or listeners every day. And we've succeeded to a great extent in getting that done. We have, on several occasions, I've had a story with my name on it on the front page of the Tribune and the Missourian on the same Sunday morning. And, it was kind of nice to have my name back in the Missourian. It hadn't been there since I was in journalism school. So that was nice. But, so we work at that. The idea that it's going to, that a story that we write is going to be in the Joplin Globe and the Columbia Daily Tribune and the Hannibal Courier Post and the West Plains Daily Quill, and that it's as strongly reported and as thorough and even-handed as anything that you'll find anywhere. That is our goal. And my goal is not to write commentary like Molly Ivins. I don't have that kind of a sharp wit. We do have Jeff Smith, the man who went to prison in St. Louis for his political fundraising shenanigans, but has come to Jesus about what politics should be about. And he writes some very good commentary for us. So, but yeah, I want us to be the go-to source for both the public and the editors around the state for the important stories out of Jeff City.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're out of time. So Rudi, thank you very much for being here and sharing your background and all your knowledge with us. So thank you. I need to go, but if anyone else wants to stick around, if Rudi can, if y'all just want to continue chatting.
I have things I need to do. One thing we do every week is we put out an advisory to Missouri newspapers of what we've published in the week, because so many papers, if you pick up the Booneville Daily News, it doesn't publish every day anymore. It's 2 or 3 times a week. And so those print editions, that's our opportunity to get in the print editions of those less frequent papers, is to remind them what we've done. So I got to get that out.
Very good. Well, appreciate it very much for spending your less time with us, Rudi. Appreciate it. Always good to hear from you.
Thank you all very much.